Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're digging into the biological code that makes every single living thing, well, unique. From a blade of grass all the way to you and me. We're going to look at genetic variation and mutation. These are the two big forces that create the incredible diversity of life we see all around us.
Okay, so let's just jump right in with a big question. One you've probably wondered about before. I mean, think about it. Look at your friends, your family. Out of the billions of people on this planet, why is it that no two are exactly alike? And yeah, it's totally true. Not even identical twins. They have the exact same DNA, but they still have these subtle little differences. So what's really going on here?
Well, the scientific answer boils down to one simple, powerful concept: variation. That's just the fancy term for all the differences in characteristics you can find within the same species. It's literally the reason life is so incredibly varied and, interesting.
All right, let's get into it. How does this variation actually shape the uniqueness of every single living thing, including you? Okay, so to really wrap our heads around this, scientists have broken these differences down into two main types. And getting this distinction is really, really key to understanding the whole picture.
So here are the two types. On one hand, you've got continuous variation. Think of this as a smooth spectrum, like a dimmer switch, with all sorts of possibilities in between. Then, on the other hand, there's discontinuous variation, which is more like a light switch. It's either on or off. The traits fit into these really clear, separate boxes. Yeah, a perfect example of continuous variation is something like height, or weight, or even skin color, right? There's no hard line. People don't just come in two flavors, short and tall. Nope. There's a whole range of heights in between. And that's usually because these traits are controlled by a bunch of different genes all working together, plus environmental factors. It's what gives you that classic bell curve shape if you graph it out. But discontinuous variation? That's a whole different story. It's super clear-cut. Take your blood type, for example. You're either type A, B, AB, or O. That's it. There are no in-betweens. You can't be kinda type A. And these kinds of traits are usually controlled by just a single gene, and the environment doesn't really have a say in it. So, okay, this all makes sense. We can see these differences on the outside, right? But what's actually happening deep down on a genetic level to create all this variety in the first place? What's the engine driving it all? Well, it really all comes down to what you could call life's genetic shuffle. It's this incredible process that happens every single time sexual reproduction takes place. Okay, so when sperm and egg cells are being made, that's a process called meiosis, by the way, three major things happen that basically shuffle the genetic deck. First, you've got crossing over, where chromosomes literally swap pieces with each other. Then there's independent assortment, which is just the random sorting of all those chromosomes. And finally, random fertilization, which means it's a total lottery which sperm meets which egg. You put all that together, and it's a guarantee that every single offspring is a brand new, totally unique genetic combo. But, shuffling the cards you already have is one thing. What happens when a totally new card gets thrown into the deck? That brings us to a whole other source of variation, one that's a lot more unpredictable. We're talking about a sudden change in the genetic code itself. And that, my friends, is what scientists call a mutation. It's a permanent, totally spontaneous, and random change in the DNA or chromosomes. And this is super important because this is how brand new traits get introduced into a population for the very first time. So you can think about this happening on two different scales. First, you have a gene mutation. This is a pretty small scale change, just affecting the code of a single gene. Think of it like a single typo in a giant recipe book. Now, that one little typo might just change the instructions for making a protein, and that can sometimes have some pretty big effects. Then you have the big one, a chromosomal mutation. This is a much, much larger event. We're talking about changes to the entire structure of a chromosome or even a change in how many chromosomes you have. To go back to our recipe book, this is like ripping out an entire page or maybe photocopying one and sticking it in twice or even putting it in the completely wrong chapter. A huge change. And what's really fascinating is looking at the different ways that genetic typos can happen. You can have a base substitution, where one DNA letter just gets swapped for another. That's what can cause something like sickle cell anemia. Or you could have a deletion, where a letter is just gone. Or an insertion, where an extra one is added. Both of those can throw off the entire reading frame of the gene, which can lead to conditions like thalassemia or cystic fibrosis. So, okay, these are kind of abstract genetic changes, right? How does this actually translate into the real world? Well, they can have a really profound impact on human health and development. This table here does a great job of showing the real-world consequences of those big chromosomal mutations. It's a pretty powerful look at how just one change in the number of chromosomes can lead to very specific syndromes. For example, having an extra copy of chromosome 21, that results in Down syndrome. If a male has an extra X chromosome, that leads to Klinefelter syndrome. And if a female is missing an X chromosome, that causes Turner syndrome. So after all this, everything from simple things like eye color all the way to complex genetic syndromes, it really brings us to a huge final question. Is all this variation and mutation, is it a bug or is it a feature? Is it a flaw in the system or is it an essential part of how life works?
And the answer, as you might guess, isn't simple. It's both. On one hand, variation is absolutely 100% essential. It's the raw material that natural selection works with. Think about it. A population with a lot of diversity has a much better shot at surviving big environmental changes. It's what keeps a species going. In that sense, yeah, it's the very engine of evolution.
But that's only half the story, right? Because on the flip side of that exact same coin, the very same processes that create all this helpful diversity they can also cause harmful mutations. And as we've just seen, that can lead to some really challenging and sometimes tragic genetic conditions. So I think the big takeaway here is this. Variation isn't really good or bad. It's just fundamental. It's a duality. It's the engine of change, and it's the very thing that makes life on this planet both incredibly resilient and at the exact same time deeply fragile. And that's a pretty powerful idea to end on.